I'm Helen Chow from Interview Right Consulting. I'm also the voice behind the podcast Smart Career Planning. I believe this is the first time I have a YouTube video in which my face is showing and not just my voice. Super excited about that. Now, for 2017, I'm going to spend more time to create video content that talks specifically about job interviews, resume writing, as well as ways anyone can create a career path that speaks to their long term career goals. About a week ago, I published a podcast titled What's Up, Coach? And in that podcast, I interviewed one of my friends who is also a professional communications coach and a serial entrepreneur. His name is Anthony Hogan. If you don't have 30 minutes to watch this video, please do go to my website at www.interviewrightconsulting.com/podcast, and you can download the audio version there. But if you do have time, please do watch the entire video. Without further ado, Anthony Hogan. Hi, Anthony.
Good morning, Helen. How you doing today?
I am doing well. Thank you so much for making the time to speak with us today.
My pleasure.
Great. So, to start out, I would love to learn a little bit about you. Can you tell us a little bit about your background and how did you get here?
Yes, so my name is Anthony Hogan. I am what I call a specter, a speaker, coach, trainer. I've been doing this on and off for 20 years in some version. I've had the opportunity over the past 20 years to do speaking, training, or coaching in at least 12 different countries: South Africa, Germany, Portugal, Bolivia, Ecuador, Dominican Republic. It really kind of all started, I would say, when I was 3 years old because my dad nicknamed me Motor Mouth. And so basically my whole life, my mouth has been moving. And luckily, with some good teaching, mentoring, and a lot of books, I realized that you can actually make a profession off of this. When I was in elementary school, I did my first speech. It was in front of the entire elementary school. It was during the 1980 elections. I might be a little bit older than I look. I was giving a speech for John Anderson. So we had someone speaking for Anderson, for Carter, and for Reagan, and the school would vote. Long story short, something happened to my glasses that day, and I ended up crying in front of my entire elementary school. So you know how forgiving and fun-loving elementary school students are. So that scarring event was actually very good because it taught me that every time I open my mouth in the public, it must be excellent. When I went on to high school, I joined both Model United Nations and Forensics, which is just a weird name for debate and public speaking, with the National Catholic Forensics League and National Forensics League. So I really learned a lot about how to communicate. I also learned a lot about how to learn to communicate because I didn't learn so much from my teachers and books, but it was like I want to use my hands like he does. I want to gesticulate like she does. I want to be able to explain things clearly like John does. So I learned from all the other great speakers that I saw in those two different programs. When I went to college, I had the benefit of a great mentor. To me, mentoring is a form of coaching. And my mentor happened to be the leader of the Student Leadership Center. I went to a program that she was running, and then she asked me, hey, would you like to work at the Student Leadership Center? I was like, yeah, make money while I'm in college. Sounds good to me, So I started working with her, and one time she was not able to give a leadership presentation. So she asked me and one of the other students who were working there to give the leadership presentation. And it was for a summer group of high school students who were coming to George Mason University, my university. And I just really enjoyed the whole process. I enjoyed doing the research, organizing the presentation, making sure the delivery was dynamic, but most importantly, looking into the eyes of the students and seeing that kind of like that wow, that aha moment when they learned something or when something happened differently. And at the end of that, they actually asked me, the entire group voted, and they voted for me to come back and be the graduation speaker. So it was really nice to see that I had impact on people. So that was awesome. In college also, like I said, I participated in Model UN, and one of my friends and I, we decided to get together to start doing coaching and training to the local Model UN clubs. Northern Virginia is a hotbed of Model UN. There's like 30 different conferences and 60 different clubs in the area. So my first business was actually Civic Simulations International, and we were going around to local schools doing training and coaching on how to be a chairperson in a Model UN conference, how to do research for a Model UN conference, how to best present your presentation for a Model UN conference. And then later on, I actually started doing that even more for a group out of New York, United Nations Association. So every year I did a couple of presentations at national events or international events on Model UN. My degree was in international relations from George Mason University. So for some reason, I thought I really loved international relations part of Model UN, but it turned out it was the communications side that I loved. So eventually I made that realization and I moved to San Francisco in 2008 and decided I wanted to become a professional speaker, trainer, coach. So my business, Evolution Communications. Evolution is the word I in evolution. So you put them together, it's evolution. It's you taking control of your own personal growth and professional development. So Evolution Communications is my business. I started 11/11/11, a date easy to remember. And I've had just a great 6 years or so really assisting and helping people to understand what they want to say and say it in a way that they can help others.
Good. And I think did you say you coach corporates and startups right now, or and also professionals too?
Yes. At this point, I spend time both in San Francisco and Mexico City. Most of my clients in San Francisco tend to be corporations or startups. And then in Mexico City, it tends to be Fortune 500 tech companies. There's a lot of Microsoft, HP, Asus down here in San Francisco. In terms of who I coach both individuals. My contracts are both for individuals who want career growth or communications growth, then also companies that want, for example, their sales engineering staff to focus a little bit more on the sales side, or they want their sales staff to just increase their communication skills and their presentation sales skills. So it's a combination of both individuals and companies that are my clients.
Nice. Now, in the beginning, you talked about you are a speaker, trainer, and a coach. What's the difference between each of them?
That's an excellent question, and a question that sadly not enough speaker trainers and coaches understand the difference. One of the big differences is the nature of the audience. So, for example, coaching is one-on-one. You spend a lot more time getting more in-depth, talking to the person, understanding what's going on, and then giving specific tools that they can try out. Then they get to try them out and come back to you and say if this worked or didn't work, and that way you can help them grow through kind of a step-by-step process of a variety of tools and techniques. Training is 1-on-5, 1-on-10, 1-on-20. It's usually 1 hour, 2 hours. Sometimes it's a half-day event or what I call a boot camp where it's a full 8-hour event. And that's where you're working through a particular issue. So it might be, for example, presentation, doing training on how to put together an excellent presentation, or my proprietary system for public speaking in terms of organizing your speech is called Brilliant Diamond Speech Crafting. So you come in with nothing and you end with a perfectly organized speech where all the information is clear. In training, it's more so about making sure that you have the right amount of exercises that the audience can do, that the participants can do inside the workshop, so they're getting something out of it, so they can walk away and have something that they can use immediately. When you're giving a speech or either a keynote or a seminar, it's usually for a much larger group. It might be 30 people, it might be 300 people, it might be 3,000 people. In that case, it's a combination of being a little bit more motivational and more how you conduct the speech, how you connect with the audience, because they're only going to get a chance to hear you from anywhere from 30 minutes to maybe an hour and a half and there's not as many exercises. You don't have a time usually in a speech to give exercises. So then you really have to make sure you craft the words perfectly, that you understand the audience and give them the things that they need to motivate them to really listen and then go back and do further investigation. Go back and read that book. Go back and get the training. Go back and try out some of the stuff that you said or research some of the things that you said. So one of the differences definitely is the size. And then the other difference is how much you get to interact with the participants. In reality, one of the things is that speaking really pays you more money. I mean, you can make anywhere from $500 to $5,000, or if you're Bill Clinton, $50,000 for an individual, 1 or 2 hour speech. And a lot of speakers also have kind of a core speech that they do over and over at different locations. So, for example, for me, one of my core speeches I do often is how to create an innovation mindset. Being ADHD, being a creative workshop presenter and having all these different ways that I creatively help people understand things, coming from an African American community that's a very creative community, living for years in San Francisco, innovation has become a part of how I do, work in business and everything. So one of my core speeches, one of my core keynotes is how to create an innovative mindset. Whereas if you look at, say, training, you get less money, but you get to affect people a little bit more because you're giving them skills that they can use kind of immediately. And you know that they're there to really kind of learn these skills. I find training to be more, I find I'm happier when I'm doing training than speaking, even though you get paid more for speaking, because to me, it's like I'm really helping the person do something in depth. Then comes coaching. Coaching, you actually make less money for, because if you think about it, it's like every minute you're there, you're owning money just for the minute that you're there. You have a lot of work to do. You have to prep before, you have to prep afterwards. So in reality, I make less money as a coach in terms of like how much of input I put into it. But it's the most rewarding to really see the changes that you're making in people's lives, to see the improvements, to watch their career path grow, to hear their managers or someone else say how they have improved. That's the most rewarding. So it's kind of a twisted curve. I like more speaking engagements because I make more money, but I enjoy coaching the most because of that hands-on, in-depth work.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned some of our clients are corporate executives
Mm-hmm.
and startup executives, and you also talked about individuals. Now, for me, for individuals approaching you to coach them, there has to be some kind of mental recognition or something is clicking. It's like, oh, I really need a coach. Now, can you tell us a little bit about that audience who tends to hire you as a coach in that way?
Great question. There essentially tend to be, I would say, three types of individuals who come to me for coaching. One type would be, for example, someone who is going in a change of career. So they know that they need to increase any particular skill to help them in this change of career. So one example is a young woman who graduated from grad school and wanted to start applying for jobs in the tech industry. So she was applying for Google. She got the interview for Google, but she was like, I want to nail this interview. So I did interview coaching with her over 4 sessions, specifically on how to go through an interview. There's a process that I use that you may be aware of. It's a famous process called the STAR technique. It's what's the situation, the task, the action you took, and the results. And I add the why. In other words, you. How does this help you, the person that you're going to see? Because in an interview, the most important person in the room is not you. It's the person who you're going to interview for. So, for example, we did a whole session on the STAR technique. Then we really did a series of practice interviews, coaching, interview, coach, interview, coach. I got her to put together what's called a story bank. It's putting all of your best stories about, in this case, your career and what you've learned in your past jobs and in school in a story format so that you can respond in that STARY format. Ending with, and this is what I would like to bring to you. So there's an example of someone who had a change in career status. Another example is someone who was the CEO of a startup. They just come to the U.S. They were part of an incubator, and they knew they wanted to become a thought leader in their field. It was a part of what they knew was going to help propel their company, for them to become a well-known speaker in their field. So that person came to me and said, look, I want to learn how to give excellent presentations on my particular field. I want to become a thought leader. I want people to call me to be the speaker. So I went through, again, Brilliant Diamond speech crafting with him. Bells and whistles and lights went off in his eyes. He said, this makes perfect sense. He started crafting his presentations that way. And then he went on to definitely become, not only is his business successful, but he's become a thought leader in his field, and he's asked to speak at a lot of different tech events. And so assisting him both in the confidence of knowing that the information he's going to present is clear, and then coaching him on how to utilize his strengths in public speaking, and then how to improve the opportunities for growth that he has so that his presentations are brilliant and dynamic. That's another example. So that's one example, someone who is going through a kind of a career change. Another example is an individual who at work realizes, or their manager or someone has told them that they need to overcome a specific issue or specific skill. So I have another gentleman in San Francisco where it's like, okay, yes, he's been told that he's been considered for the CFO position, but they're not sure. So they're also going to go outside. So he's like, okay, I need to increase my skills. I need to increase my visibility in the organization. So my coaching with him is, how does he go about and communicate better within the organization? How does he show himself being the person who would be the best CFO for this particular position? How is he communicating with the different individuals? How does he understanding? What I say, for example, is he needs to understand the communication preferences of the people he speaks with the most, not styles. I'm not talking about learning the Myers-Briggs or one of these. They're good, but let's be honest, we don't all remember all of the 38 or 16 different varieties. But you know that if your boss prefers to send you an email with bullet points, that's his preferred style of email. Mm-hmm. You know that if there is a problem and one of the people on the team that reports to you comes to your desk every time there's a problem, that their preferred communication style in very important situations is to come to you in person, you know? So it's understanding their preferences so that you can speak to another person in their preferences in those very important communications. VICs is what I call them, very important communication, settings. So you have the people who are going through a career change of some sort. You have the people that know that they need to improve a particular skill for their job. And then the third set is people who know that they want to become better speakers for whatever reason. I'm in Toastmasters and I want to become the world champion of public speaking. I want to, win my division. I would like to become a professional speaker because I'm at the end of my career and I want to take all of that knowledge and I want to turn it into a professional speaking career. Back in my parents' day, when you retired, you got the watch, you got the money for your retirement, and then you just kind of chilled out. Nowadays, people say, okay, I've been in this business for 20 years. I'm an expert. I don't just want to retire. I want to take that expertise and give it to other people and make some money while I'm doing it. So they know they want to become a professional speaker or even a professional trainer in their expertise. So I work with individuals on that. So, for example, I had a gentleman in France who has 10 or 15 years in his field, but he uses humor and everything. And so I helped him understand that, look, you have to look for the market, what the market needs. You have to look for what your skills are, okay? And then you have to look for what your desire is. And that sweet spot is in the middle. That's where you can become that professional speaker. It has to be not only something you love to do, something you have experience at, but somebody's got to want to hear it. If the market doesn't have a need for it, then it doesn't matter. It's just kind of a hobby, So I work with individuals who know that that speaking is an important part of what they want to do for their future or for now. And so they want to become the absolute best at it.
Nice. Those are really great examples. Now, I can also imagine there to be naysayers out there who will say, well, what are some scientific evidence that coaching work? What would you say to that?
Okay, that is a question that is, I would say, a question that most coaches hate to hear. The problem with the reality of what has been the research to prove that coaching works. Well, I'm going to give you three answers. One, when it comes to qualitative research, there's just not been enough qualitative research. There's been a lot done out there. A 2006 study by Middlesex University in London, that's one of my favorites. The Journal of Applied Science, Psychology did some research. The British Psychology Association did research. University of Amsterdam did research. Jessica Jarvis at CIPD, Harvard Business Review. So there is some research out there, but there's not enough qualitative research to say, here's pure numbers that show that it works. But all of the qualitative research says, yes, it's pretty much clear that this works. In reality, most of the research is quantitative. And it's clear that it works on a quantitative state because if you talk to managers who have actually had to coach people or hired coaches, they will tell you, yes, my people, they're better at what they do now. I can tell you from the clients that I work with, if you look at some of the recommendations that I have on my LinkedIn page, yes, I'm an improved speaker. I'm a better speaker. I'm a better communicator. I better understand what my audience needs. Also, the sheer number of companies, about 2/3 of companies today have coaches for their workers, for the people that work for them. So I think it's pretty clear from that perspective. But I think the last one is the most important, is that coaching is essentially a form of teaching. Teaching works. The one thing that most of us we all have in common is that we all went to school. The difference is what I call education versus learning. Education is when you learn in a specific institution. I went to Patrick Henry High School. That's the school that I cried at, by the way. I went to T.C. Williams High School. That's where I did Model UN and forensics. I went to George Mason University. These are all educational institutions. You go to an institution, you get a program, and you learn that way. Learning is based on goal-oriented learning for a specific thing that you need.
Uh-huh.
And that's what coaching is. It's teaching from a learning perspective, not an educational institution perspective. And it happens in lots of ways. Managers often coach the people that work for them. You have internal coaches or internal mentors in a particular job. Usually someone who's new at a job has an experienced person at that particular job help work them through issues and ideas for the first 6 months. Then there's external coaching, which is what I do. When you hire someone from the outside to come in and coach, and often that's in the term of what's called an executive coach or career coach. So they kind of focus on a whole lot of issues. And a lot of that coaching really is kind of a psychological behavior coaching. How can you change the behaviors in what you do? But then there's what I think I focus on more of, which is specific skill coaching. Because there are specific skills that you know that you can improve that to be better at your job. You can get a writing coach. You can get a public speaking coach. Okay? You can get specifically like just a negotiations coach. Okay? So individual skills. Now, part of that coaching, for example, I am a communications coach mostly and a leadership coach mostly. I still do executive and career coaching because you can't be a great speaker without confidence. Mm-hmm. Helping people build confidence, part of that is psychology. Part of that is what you would call executive coaching. So I think that, yes, coaching works because the nature of mankind is we do teaching and education and learning as part of what we do. So it's clear that coaching works. What's not 100% clear is having the exact qualitative numbers that says this is exactly how coaching works. But the best way to see if coaching works is to ask the person being coached. As a matter of fact, I think the wrong question is, does coaching work? I think the better question is a question that Harvard Business Review talked about, for example. They said, when does coaching work? Mm-hmm. Okay? Or the study that was done at University of Amsterdam said, how does coaching work? Mm. That is definitely the better question because it definitely works. It's just a matter of, does that coach and that particular coachee work together correctly in the best way at that time to improve the participant's skill level?
Good. Well said. Now, I mean, what you said, it makes me think of a couple of things. Number one was, for myself, I've been doing a lot of podcasts and even video recording, doing YouTube channel videos. They're really new for me. I remember I was telling my partner, I started doing podcasts and I have to listen to myself because I have to edit the podcast and I cringed. I just hated hearing myself. And I started noticing very small, minute things such as the way I project my voice. It makes me come across really insecure and not confident. And I really had to listen to it over and over because I can't expect myself to nail it in my first podcast. So I think that's definitely one of the examples. And the other one is one of my favorite books, Good to Great, where the difference between good, people can stay good for a really long time, but that book, the premise is to measure companies that are really, really good. What do they do to make it to make it accelerate and goes to great? And that's what the book is about. Just those small little things. So I think that's when coaching really comes in, whether it be on a company level, coaching them on how to do. To conduct their business, or what numbers they can look at, and what other measures they can practice or enact, or even on a personal level. And that's actually why I look to you to talk with the audience, because I really believe coaching works on many, many levels.
Absolutely. I'll just give you one example of someone that I coach and how both their career has grown. And I think part of it is because of the coaching that I gave. And then also how I have grown as a business with this particular person. So there's a company called Vungle, one of the great many San Francisco startups that I work with, and their CEO is a guy by the name of Zane. And when Zane came to the U.S., like I said, he was in an accelerator earlier, and he knew that he wanted to become a thought leader. So he had the idea in his head. What's great about that is when a person is ready, that's when they can have a coach. You know the old saying, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. Okay, it's real, because if you're not ready to listen to the information and then try it out, okay, and learn from it, then, great, I'll take your money, but I can't help you. And I've had at least 2 people that have had to say, hey, you know what, I'm sorry, I can't coach you because my style of coaching or your style of learning does not work together, and I don't want to continue to take your money if it's not effective, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So the first thing is he had the mindset, I want to become thought leader. I want to learn how to become a better speaker. So I worked with him. We went through Billion Diamond speech crafting. I helped him craft some speeches. Then he gave the speeches. I coached him through the speeches, how to be more dynamic, how to look at his strengths and work on those strengths and capitalize on those strengths, how to look at the opportunities for growth and bring them up to just to the point of competency where he can then focus on his strengths. And then he really became a very well-known speaker in his particular field. He liked the coaching so much that he said, hey, I have a CTO who's going to give a technical presentation. Can you work with him? Now, this was a technical presentation, so it was a little bit different, a lot more slides, you know, kind of a technical slide deck. But I showed him how he can take that slide deck and translate it into a brilliant diamond. So it's not a death by PowerPoint, you know, that old term. It's not a boring presentation, you know. So then that worked out very well. I actually have a very good recommendation for him also, like, for example, on my LinkedIn. But then from there, when they created their sales staff, Zane said, hey, I want you to work with the sales staff to teach them some of these same techniques. And as I say, my best customers are the ones who eventually no longer need me. So eventually what Vungle did is they put some of my techniques, and I worked with some of their early salespeople that became the senior salespeople to help them craft their onboarding process for salespeople. So now I don't coach their salespeople as much. I actually help coach anybody in the company that wants communications coaching. But their sales staff has an onboarding process that includes lots of the different process and procedures that I use. So I got a chance to see Zane grow from someone who says, hey, I want to be a better speaker and have some issues and not be able to clearly and dynamically say he wants to say, to become a very well-known speaker in his field. And I've got a chance to see his company grow, not only from 3 different buildings because they keep growing, but to be able to see the impact that I've had on helping the company understand how to best use communication skills in terms of working with each other, again, learning their communication preferences for each of the people that they work with, and in terms of how the sales staff puts together a presentation. So there's probably my most successful example of seeing someone go from the very beginning seed to a successful business. From the very beginning, I want to become a great speaker, to becoming a great and sought after speaker in his or her particular field.
Good. Now, I know you alluded to this earlier on in the podcast or in this video. You put in a lot of work when you coach one individual. Now, what does a coach, or what do you do that make coaching work? It could be the planning process. It could be, you know, the way you interact with the person. What makes it work?
Well, I think there's again 3 things. Rule of 3 is something that we always use in speaking anyway. So, excuse me. So I think there's 3 things. One is that I always say that the first rule of speaking is to listen, especially in coaching. So, for example, I give a free 30 minutes for the first time I talk with someone about coaching them or even giving training for a company or something. So the purpose of that is for me to listen, to see what it is that they need, to see if I can provide it. Okay. Sometimes I can't provide it. I have a network of speakers, trainers, and coaches that I would suggest you to somebody else who I think is good. So the first thing is to listen to what that person is saying. So if you're going for a coach, does that coach listen to what you're actually saying? Do they hear exactly what you need? Okay. So I think that's the first thing. I think the second thing is the tips and techniques that you try. So I have a lot of tips and techniques, and sometimes you have to keep trying different tips and techniques until you find the one that works. One time I was working with an accelerator called New Me. It's the actually only Black female owned accelerator in San Francisco, and it focuses on both females, African Americans, and other minorities that are not well represented in San Francisco. So I was the pitch coach. So I go in and for this one particular class that they had, and actually the most successful entrepreneur was a woman whose business existed for 5 years and by far had made the most money of all of them. But she was a very timid speaker. So I was coaching her through her pitch, and I'm telling you, I tried every single tip and tool that I ever had, and I could not get her to project. And so finally I said, okay, who is your favorite speaker? And she said Barack Obama. I said, okay, what's your favorite Barack Obama speech? I said, look it up online, and I want you to listen to the speech. Okay, now I want you to give the speech as he's giving it. So when he says a line, you say a line. When he says a line, you say a line. Okay? And then I said, now I want you to give your pitch and I want you to channel your best Barack Obama. And for the first time, actually projected. And it was funny because when we left the room, the other people in her cohort were looking like, "Oh my God, that was you," because for the first time she projected. So making sure that the coach has a lot of tips and techniques because everybody's different. As I alluded to earlier, Zane, who is going to be speaking more to a general audience versus the CTO who was going to be speaking specifically to engineers and developers, they have to say things a little bit differently because their audience is a little bit different. When you're a coach, each person that you coach is a little different. So you have to learn the different techniques and tools. So the second thing that I use is a variety of tips and techniques and keep trying the ones until I find the one that works. Okay? So when you're looking for a coach, try out the coach's tips and techniques. If they work for you, great. If they don't, say, "Hey, this is not working. I need something else." If that coach can't provide you with something else, then that's not the right coach for you. Then the third thing is the relationship. One of the biggest differences, you asked earlier, the difference between speaking, training, and coaching. One of the biggest differences in coaching, you create a relationship. So it's how well did you work and coordinate with that particular coach. If you don't feel comfortable, even if they're a great coach, if you don't feel comfortable with that coach, it's not going to be the best coaching scenario for you. So one of the things that I try to do is, luckily, again, I have ADHD, so I can talk about anything for 5 minutes, is that I try to make sure I develop a good rapport and really understand and know the people that I coach very well. I don't have the best memory, so I make sure I write everything down. Part of my CRM is to have, all the information for my clients in there and to record the sessions, for example, so I can go back and listen if I need to, so I can really remember and understand the client. So again, make sure that the coach actually listens first. Make sure that they have good tips and techniques, and that when you try them, if they work for you, great. If they don't, that there's more tips and techniques that they can give you. And then third, make sure that there's a good relationship between you and the coach. I think for me, those are the things that that work the best for me. And each of these I had to learn. For example, for the listen, there's one particular client that I have, Twilio, another San Francisco startup, not Trulio, but Twilio, Twilio. I was working with their sales engineering team, and they had a new manager come on, and she told me straight up, "No, your style doesn't work for us. What I need from you is for you to, when you're teaching them Brilliant Diamond speech crafting or Aesop's arc storytelling, I need you to use Twilio stories." Okay, so I want to change how you do it. So the person comes in and they give a pitch for Twilio. Then you teach them Brilliant Diamond, and they give the pitch again in the Brilliant Diamond format. Now, Gauri, who was the sales manager, the manager of the sales engineering team, I listened to her, and I am a better coach because of it. I'm a better trainer because of it, because now I use that style, because she knew her people. And she said, "No, I want them first to use only Twilio stories. And second, I want them to give the story, then listen to your style to see the difference, and then give it again." So I learned to listen. One of the best lessons that I had on listening is from my client. When it comes to the different tips and techniques, that's, I think, the thing that I do well. I think I only have 2 skills that God gave me. One is the gift of the gab. Again, Dad named me Motor Mouth. But 2 is that I can think of a variety of different ways and tips and techniques to show people, because I can take in all of this, information. And then when it comes to relationship building, I think that's something that I learned on a personal level. The people that I have the best relationship with, the people that I work the best with, are people that I have built some type of rapport with, So I think that throughout my career, those 3 things that I utilize in my coaching, I have learned over my life.
Great, great, great. Now, before we wrap up, how do people get in touch with you?
So my webpage actually is being developed right now. Even though I've been in business for 6 years, all of my business has come from word of mouth. I believe I'm good at what I do, and my clients believe I'm good at what I do, so they refer me. So finally, I'm go ahead and putting up the webpage. But right now, the easiest way is through my LinkedIn page. And it's basically, if you go to LinkedIn, just look up Anthony L. Hogan. The business name is Evolution Communications. So we also have a Facebook business page. And then my email address is just my name. I made it that way because it's easy. It's anthony.l.hogan@gmail.com. And of course, since they're on your podcast, you know me, you know how to get in contact with me, so they can definitely contact you to find me.
Great. Well, thank you so much for your time, Anthony.
It's been my pleasure. Absolutely. Thank you so much for the service of providing this podcast. I've been listening to some of the podcasts, and I definitely learned definitely a lot from the people that you have interviewed. And I hope that I have brought some great value to your listeners also.
Absolutely. Thank you.
My pleasure.